Nobody knows what this grass is.
Not you, not even you.
Not me, not the NRCS, nobody. I've never seen it before.
Really? It's called Salatin grass.
No, what it is, it's ancient pre-European grass. It's what was here when the bison were here. We started with woods. This was just regular woods, just like over here. This is what happens if you just walk away and leave it. And we open it up, cut the big trees, and we put in the pigs, and we let them disturb the ground. Forages started coming up, and that disturbance awakened the latent seed bank. And so we believe that we're tapping into the pre-European seed bank that was here when the bison and the Native Americans were here. And to think that these seeds have been unexpressed, waiting for 300 years. This is one of my favorite places to bring my radical environmentalist friends that view the only credible way for us to interact with the environment is to abandon it. We've got to lock it up in a park, Bureau of Land Management, a wilderness area. Our sense is we want environmentalism by participation. The participation is the one that pleases God because that runs to His creation, not away from His creation.
Well, welcome to another February edition of Doug Wilson and Friends. Seems like we were just here because we were a week ago.
That's because we have so many friends.
We have so many friends, and this time we have Doug Wilson as always. I'm Joe Rigney, Jared Longshore, James Ingebretson is with us as well, and the special guest, the lunatic farmer himself, Joel Salatin. Joel, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a true delight and a privilege.
And the reason that we wanted to have you on is because Canon Plus has just released on the app The Lunatic Farmer, a documentary about you and your family, your history, the farm there in Virginia. And so we just want to take a chance to talk about it. I'll kick it off by saying I watched this over the weekend with my family, and I felt a little bit like King Agrippa when he said to Paul, "Thou almost persuadest me to become a farmer." It was one of those moments where my wife has always said, "Hey, can we get some land? Could we?" She wants to be a farmer, and I'm like, "I am an academic. I live in a classroom. I don't think I could do it." You actually made it look fun and easy, and I assume it's probably some fun. I doubt it's as easy as you made it look in the documentary itself, but it was really great. So would you maybe give us a little bit background for those who haven't seen the documentary yet, kind of how you got started in the farming?
Well, I guess to take that story, I have to go almost back to my grandfather. My dad's dad was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine. He always wanted to be a farmer. He never did. He was a tool and die maker at a Chrysler facility in Indiana, but he had a very, very large garden. I mean, probably half an acre, which is a pretty big garden. He sold strawberries and berries and eggs. He had an octagonal chicken house and stuff. And Dad kind of got the farming bug from him, and also the non-chemical approach. And so Dad, he's coming along. My dad was flew in the Navy in World War II. After the war, he goes to Indiana University on the GI Bill, and he's thinking, how can I start farming? I'm a young guy, no money, no land. What do I do? And a lot of people don't realize that right there in that period of time in the mid 1940s, post World War II, our colleges in our country were inundated with socialism. That's one reason why Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged during that time, and a famous libertarian novel piece. And so he saw this coming, and he said, "You know what? I'm heading out of here. I'm going to go to a place that's freer and free markets and da da da. So I'm going to go to South America." So he got his degree in business economics, and then went to Middlebury in Vermont for a semester. Then hitchhiked to Mexico, spent 6 months, sat for the Foreign Civil Service exam in Spanish, passed it, and got on as a bilingual accountant with Texas Oil Company to Venezuela, and in 7 years earned enough money to buy a 1,000-acre farm in the highlands of Venezuela and begin farming. And and the idea was to do dairy and broilers, and we were doing it. We were out there living on the land. Then he had my older brother. Then he had me, or I guess mom had us actually, and he had something to do with it, but not a whole lot. And so here we are out on the land. Well, the indigenous chickens in Venezuela all had postnasal drip. They had snot dripping out of their because they had subtherapeutic pneumonia due to the lack of sanitation in their situation, open sewers and all this, early 1950s. And so, make a long story short, Dad very quickly cornered the local chicken market because our chickens were clean. And of course, the other farmers accused us of voodoo and witchcraft. And so in 1959 there was a junta, a coup d'état, and in those kinds of anarchy situations, scores it allows scores to be settled that wouldn't be settled otherwise. And so basically, the machine guns came in the back door. We fled the front door, and stayed another 8 or 9 months trying to get protection. Couldn't get anything. So the only thing to do was to come back to the states. Came back to the states. Found this worn out, rock piled, gullied farm here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It was cheap. Started over. Dad was 39. He'd lost everything, and started over, and still couldn't. How do we make a living on this farm? And so he was an accountant. Mom was a school teacher. Those off farm jobs paid for it. But Dad was an experimenter, and so we grew up with composting, portable infrastructure, all sorts of strange, different kinds of ideas. So now I'm in high school, and I want to farm. How do I get to the farm full time? And so we finally, our family joke is it took us 3 generations to get there, but with the land paid for, I didn't have to rebuy the land, and so Teresa and I got married, fixed up an attic apartment up in the attic of the farmhouse, drove a $50 car. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We lived on about $300 a month, and we were able to save enough in 2 years to live for 1 year without working off the farm. So September 24, 1982, I walked out of the newspaper office. I was an investigative reporter at the local newspaper. Walked out of there and came back to the farm full time, not really expecting to make it, but in the providence of the Lord, we that little cruise of oil, if you will, lasted, and we made it. And it took us about 3 years it took us 3 years to exhale. I think we're going to make it, and we did. And so here we are today. So, the farming bug has been in our family, but it literally took us 3 generations to get there.
That's amazing. One of the things that really did come through is that kind of generational element, and now your son runs the farm now. Is that right? And
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you have grandkids?
We do.
And and how old are they? And are they still working the deal like you did when you were a kid?
The two boys here still live on the farm. The granddaughter doesn't, and so I don't know where they're going to go. One thing you can't do is you can't make kids feel conditional love, that if they don't do what I want you to do, I'm not going to love you anymore. So, this gets to be a very critical issue, but I can tell you right now, it's interesting that when I came back full time and we started Polyface, Polyface Farm, I was out, Dad and I were out milking the cows. We were talking about what should we call this? We're gonna make a business corporation. We're gonna do this thing. Remember, he was an accountant, so he knew all this stuff. And he said, well, we'll be Salatin Incorporated. And I remember like yesterday, we didn't argue much, but that was one that I put my foot down. I said, no, Dad. I said, this is way bigger than our family. There may be a day when a Salatin isn't running this. We want to keep this door wide open, that it can go on in perpetuity without us at the helm. And so he acquiesced, and we named it Polyface, the Farm of Many Faces. So the grandkids are still very young, finding their ways and different things. Of course, they grow up here and had their things. One of them is very mechanical, so he's down at a diesel mechanic shop, and the other one's very video oriented. He's doing a bunch of video work. So we don't know where they're gonna, if they'll come back, but we have a team of 22 people, and so if it doesn't stay run by a Salatin. That's perfectly fine with me. We've got a fantastic team of people that have caught the vision, and they can perpetuate it. It's like saying, well, you know, when Paul went, well, then the gospel would cease to exist. Well, no, the vision was way bigger than Paul.
That's right.
So going back to what Joe said about you made it look easy, how long is your workday? When do you get up and when do you head in?
Yeah, so I've always gotten up at daybreak. I enjoy getting up early, but we go to bed. We go to bed early. But as far as a work day, it's daybreak. I've always gotten up and done chores, which usually take hour and a half. Then come in for breakfast. That gives Teresa time to get up and around. I'm the morning guy. She's the night owl, so that works real well with our schedule. She can sleep in a little bit and then have breakfast when I come in, and then we have breakfast, and then I go out and do the work day, and I'm working until supper, and we have supper and usually go to bed pretty early.
Okay.
We don't have a TV, so we don't stay up watching the late night news or anything,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, there's the work day. So and it's obviously it's intermingled. I mean, the one nice thing about the farm is that every day is different. It's not like you have an everyday routine. It rains sometimes, so that's when you catch up on desk work and don't do anything outside. And then there's other days when it's hay is on the ground, the sun's shining, and you're going. After supper, you run out and try to get something done, even mow something, or even before dark. So there's some long days and some shorter days.
What about the seasonal aspect? In industrial farming out here, the winter is when a lot of the farmers work on their equipment. It's like 3 months of in the shop getting everything up. On a smaller scale farm like yours, it's not industrial farming. What do you do in the winter?
So yeah, it is seasonal, and for sure, winter is less, should we say, less of a sprint than in the
Mm-hmm.
summer, than during the season, because we don't have broiler chickens, we don't have turkeys. But when we finish the grass and the cows come in on hay, then we trade moving the cows every day, which is very, very easy, to feeding them hay, every day, and then they need bedding. So we do a lot of woods work in the winter, a lot of woods work, chipping for the carbonaceous diaper for the bedding that we then can compost. We do a lot of sawmilling, just a lot of woods work. The snakes are gone, poison ivy's wilted. So it's a good time to work in the wood. The leaves are gone. You can see what you're doing. So we do a lot of woods work and yes, and maintenance and construction, if we're going to build a shed or something like that. So the pace is definitely different in the wintertime. And when the weather's really cold and snowy, we read and recuperate.
Right?
Joel, I haven't had the chance to watch the actual documentary yet. I'm going to sit down with my wife and 7 kids and do that soon. We actually I tapped onto Canon Plus and attempted to do so, but I realized that I went to the high-level lunatic farmer stage. I watched a short video of you laying out, like mapping out how you would work with the terrain and where you'd put fences and all of this stuff, which was fascinating to me. So maybe for people that haven't actually had a chance to watch the doc yet, could you just give us like the 10,000-foot view of what you're up to? Like, where is your farm? How big is your farm? What are the main things that you're doing on the farm? Just I haven't had a chance to visit. What's it like around there?
Yeah, fair enough. So we're in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, which is on the western edge of Virginia, not to be confused with West Virginia. We tell West Virginia.
Right. Western Virginia.
Yeah, Western, yes. There's a big difference between Western Virginia and West Virginia. Yeah, let's make that abundantly clear. All right. So the Shenandoah Valley is roughly 80 miles long, 20 miles wide. We're on the western edge of it, so we have 1,000 feet of elevation difference on the farm. There's a lot of mountain land here, but our mountains are not sharp like they are in Colorado. You know, we have trees on our mountains, and so the original core property that Mom and Dad bought was 550 acres. And 10 years ago, we then purchased a neighbor's 100, and then 4 years ago, purchased another neighbor's roughly 300. So we've got about 950 acres that we own, and then we lease about another 1,000 acres in the community that we in about 10 different properties that we manage as well. So we're in pastured livestock. So we have cattle, beef cattle, pigs, chickens, both eggs and meat, turkeys, rabbit, duck, lamb, and then of course we have a sawmill and do a lot of timber projects, and we direct market everything. So it's everything is a branded, direct marketed product. We haven't planted a seed or bought a bag of chemical fertilizer in 65 years. And when we came, the place was, big gullies and rock piles. And over the period of time, we've watched those, barren fields turn into abundance, to where when I was a kid, we could only support about 15 cows. Today on the same land, 100 cows. We built, I don't know, 20 ponds. So we believe in a lot of intersecting environments. So the three great environments are open land, forest land, and riparian or water. And so we've planted a lot of trees. We've cut openings into the forest on gentle ground, flat ground. So we've done some conversion of open land to forest and forest land to open land, and built about 20 ponds to try to create this variegated mosaic of forest, open, and riparian, to create the most diversified flora and fauna possible, which then creates the greatest amount of ecological balance in the place. So it's very much like, you can't all be prophets, and you can't all be have the gift of hospitality. It's like the gifts of the church. And so part of our management here is to gift the land with as much different kinds of habitat as possible, to create additional living being comfort zones, whether those are plants or animals. And so there are a lot of empirical evidence of what this does. One of the most recent was, we just finished a 2-year study with the Smithsonian. They were doing a working landscape study. They had about 30 spots picked around the state. We were the only one that had all 30 known breeds of bumblebees known to exist in Virginia. And so that's kind of cool, to have those all those pollinators here. So those kinds of things just kind of they come along and affirm what you're doing, the harmony of the ecology.
One of the things that I would chime in on that and say, if I could describe Joel's project, in one word, it'd be just abundance. He is kind of adamant and obsessed with how do we deal with the land in a way that glorifies God, in a way that 10x's the production of whatever it is we're trying to do. So Joel's approach, and what really captivated me, was he's just obsessed with, how do I turn a bigger profit on this chunk of land and 10x that. So
without steroids,
without chemicals. So doing it. It's not just some organic hand waving. It's like, how do we figure out how to hack this?
It's actually producing something
in a non-zero sum way, to overproduce and go above and beyond.
Joe, I'm really interested. So, if we're looking at your land, and back in the day, you're like, well, we're going to plant trees there to create this ecological harmony. other than the bumblebees, like why are you planting? Like if you were saying we're planting trees here, we're going to turn this into forest. Why would you do it? Why would you choose a particular section, a particular area, and other? What else does it do for the land or for the cattle or whatever?
Yeah, well, it's very strategic. So in our view, for example, when we came, we had some very steep hillsides. I mean, sleigh ride hillsides, really steep, that were just barren and had these gullies on them. We measured one gully; it was 16 feet deep. So you know how much soil that is. If you've got 16-foot deep gully, they're slanted sides. Come in. I mean, those are hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of soil on these gullies. And so those steep hillsides, gullies, things like that, that's where we planted the trees in an effort to try to, get things stabilized. So you arrest the erosion. And if it's that steep, you're never going to drive on it anyway to make hay or spread compost or anything. So we believe very much that the terrain, including low ground, marshy ground, where we would not want that in pasture, but wet ground, low ground, that's where we can build a pond. Okay, and so you basically let the terrain speak to you. And this is not mystical or weird. Okay, I mean we're just strategically looking at the terrain as to what is most applicable in that spot that will enable it to be its most abundant self.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just jumping in but your high level course that I watched, you were talking about how much rainfall over land.
Right.
Like you were actually measuring out how much just an inch of rain across this amount of land, and you're catching water like off of roofs and whatnot. I'd be interested. I know that my grandfather-in-law did that very thing, but like how much when you catch all this water off of a roof. I'm assuming you're catching in big barrels or whatnot. You're then using that water to do. Is that just water for the cattle? Is that water for the animals? What do you do with all the water that you actually retain when this waterfall happens?
Yeah, well, I wish we could retain it all. We don't catch our roof water on very many of our roofs. We just haven't done that. But what we have built is a lot of ponds to catch surface runoff. And so worldwide, 1/3 of all raindrops become surface runoff because they either come too fast for absorption or too much at a time and the ground's already saturated and it can't absorb anymore. So surface runoff is, of course, what becomes flood, and you have floods. So we believe very strongly that part of our interface, our responsibility with this land, which is God's land, ultimately, it's God's stuff, is to build forgiveness into it so that the shocks of nature, floods, droughts, wind, heat, cold, so that the shocks of nature are ameliorated by the forgiveness that we've built into the landscape. And so ponds are one of the ways to do this. And people don't realize 500 years ago, North America was 8% water. 500 years ago. Now, they weren't built by caterpillars and bulldozers. They were built by beavers. There were 200 million beavers here building ponds. Today, North America is down to less than 4% water. So when you look at hydration, just one specific thing of hydration, we have dropped by more than 50% our surface runoff levees, if you will, our capacity to ameliorate these shocks of flood and drought as we have dried out the landscape. And so we're on a bit of a tear here we might not be able to get back to 8% water, but and we don't have the beavers anymore. What we do have is excavation equipment, and we can do the beavers one better because the beavers always built in creeks. We can go even higher on the landscape, permaculture style, go up to where water is not running, put a dam in there, and then when you have surface runoff in a hurricane, a big rain event, snow melt, then you can catch that water. And so it's a tremendous amount. And few things make me happier than going up during things are flooding on the river down here, and I go up on the four-wheeler, and the pond still has 8 inches of water till it fills up, and I know I have not added to that flood downstream. We've kept that water in our bank account, if you will, our deposit, and then when it gets dry, we can then use that water to irrigate and keep the grass growing, keep the forage growing, so that it attracts, so that it converts sun energy into biomass even in a drought. So that's how you build that forgiveness. And when you have excess, you hold it so that when there's a drought, you've got that base to continue collecting sun energy. And I think it's pretty cool that the sun is called the sun, and in our Christian lives it's our energy field is the son. And so the point is that when there is excess grace of hydration in our lives, to be able to stockpile that and utilize it in the droughts of our lives, that's a powerful thing. So we view all of physical creation as an object lesson of spiritual truth. How can we see God's majesty, divinity, and grace manifested physically through this? Because when you just have a focus group and you don't have a physical place to plant your doctrine on, it makes systematic theology difficult to put fingers and feet on it. It's like love. All right. Well, we want to love, but love requires an object. Well, who are you going to love? How are you going to love them? That's the deal. And so we believe that part of the reason for creation was so that we creatures would be able to see a physical manifestation of the Creator's providence and divinity expressed, so that, I'll just say it very clearly, when somebody leaves our farm and drives out, we want them to be able to look at each other and say, oh, that's what forgiveness looks like. Oh, that's what mercy looks like. Oh, that's what provision looks like. We want that conversation to happen as a result of the way we've managed God's possessions.
So the exhortation would be, get some more ponds in your soul.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
So if I can move the subject a little bit, I've got a question about distribution. So here's the question about distribution. Have you or someone you know done a calculation on comparing prices when people shop for food from organic farms? Frequently, it's a rich hippie thing, and if you're poor, lower middle class, and you buy your milk at Walmart, you that sort of thing. Have you done the calculation whether a farm like yours would be competitive if we subtracted government subsidies for agriculture? If we took all government money away, would your method of farming be able to stay step for step with more conventional farming methods? Price-wise.
I can't answer it, categorically. Yes, I can. I will tell you though that whenever there's a shock to the system, that's when we shine. And right now, for example, our retail price on large eggs is $8. I think Daniel told me it's $8.50 or something like that. which is actually quite competitive to, to store prices in the area, and
Okay.
we have eggs. When when Putin invaded Ukraine, um, fertilizer jumped 400%, and all the farmers were crying, well, it didn't affect us at all because we don't buy any fertilizer. So back in COVID, when prices jumped, I remember very well. I was out in the sales building, and I just was there, and I heard this lady kind of gasp, like she, and I went over to her. I said, "Are you okay? What?" She says, "Well, I just came from Costco. Your ribeye steaks are $3 a pound cheaper than at Costco." And so we have run many. We've gone numerous times to Whole Foods. We call them Whole Paycheck, and the different places. To look at the branded stuff, and we've actually created charts in our sales building to show how competitive we are. Uh, we're quite competitive.
So is Polyface an odd duck compared? I know everybody would know that you're distinct from Costco, but are you as distinct from Whole Foods?
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. Whole Foods. You got to realize that the government certified organic is an adulterated.
Well, the government's in it, so.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I never say certified organic or organic without putting the government certified organic on, because that's what now owns the name, and so it's been so adulterated. I mean, we're the only country in the world that government organic certifies soilless tomatoes and strawberries. 95% of government certified organic chicken, beef, whatever, is raised in a feedlot on a factory farm. Milk, dairy. I mean, it's just become a joke. So, yeah. So
Joe,
we're quite different than all of them, because none of those are pasture based. They're not out on the grass. They're not out on the pasture. They're not getting the salad bar, and it's the salad bar that has all the carotenes, the phytochemicals, and has the power.
Okay.
Yeah, Joel, I have a question that my son came up with. As we were watching, my son noted, I said as we were watching, hey, I'm going to be interviewing this guy, think of questions. And at one point you talk about some of the opposition that you face. So you have this vision of kind of, when I was watching it, I was thinking, you used the word abundance a lot, but sort of fruitful dominion was kind of the phrase that kind of came to my mind as you were describing how you guys have structured things, this kind of hands-on approach. We are going to take mastery of nature, but we're not going to dominate it. We're actually going to cut with the grain of the way that God made the world and try to improve it and make it fruitful, because that's what God made us for. And so I'm listening for fruitful dominion. And then you start talking about the opposition that you faced. And you mentioned one particular story about when I don't know if it was FDA or somebody showed up at your door and saying, hey, we got to take your chickens or something. But you alluded to other times when you've met some opposition, and that piqued my son's interest, because all he wanted to know was, like, I want to know who else wanted to stop him. So maybe talk a little bit about kind of the reason that you're the lunatic farmer is that you don't neatly fit into anybody's box,
Right.
and you're kind of you're in your own sort of thing. Although hopefully it's catching on a little bit here. But what is some of the opposition? Why would people be opposed to a sort of fruitful dominion? I'm thinking about my neighbor downstream so that the flood doesn't affect them. I'm trying to cut with the grain of the land and improve it, make it fruitful. How could anybody be opposed to this? Why would they want to stop you?
Well, the reason that I took the handle lunatic farmer years ago was after a phone conversation where a guy told me that I was a bioterrorist and a typhoid Mary. He was another local farmer guy, and of course many of them call me a starvation advocate, because we all know compost can't begin to compete with chemicals. I mean, that's the paradigm. And so I made a decision at that time. It's been numerous years ago. I could either be depressed and frustrated and angry about that kind of thought, or I could just embrace it and have fun with it. And I decided to embrace it and have fun with it. And that's why I came up with sure, yeah, of course I'm a lunatic, of course I'm a lunatic. And it turned out that it's been the best thing I ever did because there's only one lunatic farmer in the whole world. That's me. If you Google lunatic farmer, it's going to be me. And it's pretty cool to come up with something that's unique in the whole world. I mean, it's hard to come up with something with a new idea that not a single person in the world has ever come up with.
Way to corner the market. You've cornered the
Yeah,
market.
it is. It is.
It's good branding. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So that's why it developed. But probably the single biggest, I mean, the government opposition. That's one thing, and that's of course scary enough because they've got guns and all that stuff. But the biggest opposition is from conventional farmers who view me as a threat. They actually do believe that my unvaccinated cows have to be sick because we know wellness comes out of a syringe or a tube. And so if I'm not using that, I have to have sick cows that are going to make their cows sick and they're going to lose their farms because I'm so negligent. I don't do all the protocol for the cows.
How could it make their cows sick if their cows are vaccinated?
Well, it's kind of like the COVID thing, why is my not taking the COVID jab hurtful to you? I mean, if you believe in it, then you ought to be protected from me. But there's no rhyme or reason for it. And if you really want to make the conventional farming community angry, just allude to the fact that there might be good farmers and bad farmers. That we're not all one happy, all for one for all, we're all just one big happy family. But if you dare to allude that there are good farmers and bad farmers, boy, that's like dynamite in the conventional ag community. Just like daring to say there are good churches and bad churches, or there are good preachers and bad preachers. What who gave you the right blah blah blah. And so it's a similar thing that we see in.
Do you think that there's a is that changing at all? Like I can imagine, in the 80s, 90s, you're starting out with some of this experimental stuff. You're doing things a little unconventionally. You're not using the chemicals. You're moving the chickens around in these mobile coops. You're moving the cows and all this kind of stuff. And people look at that and say, I've never seen that. I don't know about that. But now you've got a track record of 40, 50 years and have sort of seen sort of the fruitfulness that you can point to. Do you see converts? Do you see people, conventional farmers, who all of a sudden go, hey, maybe there is something to that? Does the shock to the system, that Ukraine not being able to get us fertilizer, all of a sudden people are a little more open to maybe having a harder target from the shocks of the economic system and so forth?
Nobody around here.
Okay.
Prophet's never loved in his own country. You got to put on a suit coat and get a suitcase and go 500 miles away from home before they think you're something, have a message to say. So, around here, I mean, we have wonderful neighbors. We talk. We're not at war with each other. We just live on different planets. And what comes back to us routinely in our closest, I mean, like our adjacent neighbors, the ones that see what we do day after day after day. There's not open hostility, but kind of a head scratching. What? I don't get it. One of my favorites, we had a couple years ago, our hay baler broke down. Well, when the sun's shining and the hay's in the windrow, you got to make hay. And so we called a neighbor that had a baler and said, hey, could you come over and finish this up for us? So he sent a young guy that was working for him over with his baler machine, and he baled up the field. And when he got done, he climbed down out of the tractor, and my son was there. Daniel was there. I wasn't there, so I'm giving you Daniel's. So this is one person removed from the thing. So hopefully it hasn't gone clear down the gossip chain yet. But the guy got out, and he says to Daniel, he says, "Man," he said, "I've never seen anything like this." He says, how do you grow grass like this? I mean, I've never seen anything like this. And Daniel says, well, we move the cows every day, and he started explaining how we, give the grass rest, and then we pound it real hard with, high density and mobs, my phrase is mob stocking, herbivorous solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. And,
Rolls right off the tongue.
and so Daniel gets done, just a quick little 1 minute rendition, and the guy looks at him again. He says, "Well, what do you put on it? What's your fertilizer?" Daniel says, "All right, we move the cows every day. We do this high density. He goes through the whole thing again. He did this 3 times. After the third time, the guy just got disgusted. He climbed his tractor, shaking his head, said, "Man, I wish you guys would tell me what you put on here, because I've never seen anything like this." He got in his tractor and went away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's not open hostility. It's just, how can you be that way? And isn't that the winsome way we as believers should be to people outside? We shouldn't be antagonistic to them. We should be so happily satisfied in what we're doing that it becomes, if it doesn't attract them, at least it's enigmatic, and it creates a conversation with somebody who, what is it with you? You actually act like you love people. Wouldn't that be cool?
So follow this up again. The farmers I know, they're all hardworking people. Does the style of farming that you do, is it harder or is it more intentional all the time? You just mentioned you move the cows every day, for example. Somebody else might say, that sounds like a big headache, moving the cows every day. Do you have to be on it more than someone else? Is it just easier to apply fertilizer and be done?
Yeah. Well, there's no there's no rocking chair this side of eternity. So what you're trading for is different things. I mean, all right, so we move the cows every day, but the average farmer around here feeds hay for 120 days a year. We only feed hay for 40 days a year. So they have to make 120 days worth of hay, whereas we only have to make 40 days worth of hay. So every day of the year, they're worried about hay. They're either making hay, trying to grow hay, or feed hay. And it for us, it's just a tiny part of our thought process. And most of the time we're not even feeding it. And goodness, the cows self-harvesting. You don't have to have a machine. You're not driving a machine. There's no breakdowns. The cows don't need their oil change. They don't need spare parts. They're pretty easy maintenance. By moving them every day, we get double the production. I mean, we rent about 10 properties in the area, and we've been doing this for 30 years. There's not a single property that we have rented in the entire area here that in the very first year we didn't double their production. I've run a pencil on what's it worth moving the cows every day. It's about $100 an hour. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty happy to work for $100 an hour. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, we can get the cows in. They're always in these little. We'll put 400 in a 3-acre field. All right, we can always find our cows in the spring. We're coming into spring now. They're getting ready to calve. These neighbors, they're out there. They spend half a day every day on a 4-wheeler out running around their 100, 200 acres trying to find calves and find cows. Ours are all in one little group. In 5 minutes, we can see everybody. We move them every day. We know who's lagging behind, who's getting ready to calve. All these things. I mean, there are massive efficiencies and time savings in what we do. So in the big picture, I think the big picture, we don't. Ours is certainly not harder, and it's certainly more enjoyable. Then I'm not sure that there's actually less, hours, less minutes per pound of ribeye steak. I haven't run it that closely, but for sure, I think a lot of this is trading worry and stressful hours for enjoyable, beautiful hours.
I'm curious about, so you mentioned your dad was kind of an experimenter And I'm curious about, maybe give us a little window on some of those experiments that you did, or when you were doing something that was working okay, and then you found all of a sudden a better way to do it. Like because it seems like a big part of what the abundance method, or the fruitful dominion method, really is built on a kind of curiosity and wonder at the way God made the world. Like, there's some secrets in here I got to figure out. And I like, we were talking in the break, but about kind of how do you people talk about hacking this.
Yeah.
How do you hack these things, but in a way that's not violating the integrity of the thing itself, but instead kind of cutting with the grain of it. So you got an example or two of how you've experimented and figured out a better way?
It's like the difference between curiosity and voyeurism.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I appreciate the question deeply there. That's good. A couple of experiments. One of my most poignant childhood memories. I don't know how old I was, 6, 7, maybe. But Sunday afternoon, Dad says, "Hey, let's take a ride." And so Sunday afternoon, we all get in the car and we go. I don't remember where it was. I don't remember how far it was away. All I remember, so we went and visited this farm, and this guy had portable shelters. I don't remember whether it was pigs, lambs, goats, chickens. I don't know what it was. But what I remember is coming home, Dad literally levitating off the seat with the idea of mobile shelter, mobile infrastructure. That was a breakthrough, because he'd already arrived at the idea of animals move. I mean, that simple phrase. You look at animals move. They're not locked up in confinement buildings. They move. All right, but if they move, you've got to control them. You've got to give them shelter. You got to get them water. How do you do it if the animals are going to move every day? And so this was a breakthrough. So he came home and he began experimenting with mobile infrastructure. The first one was a rabbit shelter thing. My older brother had wanted to start raising rabbits, so he built this rabbit thing. Then he built a portable veal barn where we could raise veal calves. We had a couple milk cows, and the calves would jump out and nurse the cows to milk them. And then the rabbit thing didn't work. So by that time, I was old enough to have chickens, and so I put my chickens in there. And then, of course, the whole pastured poultry thing was built, and so that was a big deal. Another experiment was that didn't work. There were some that didn't work. One that didn't work was we were making loose hay, and he had the idea of, what if we could just go in the barn and dump and make bread loaves stacked on end, and just stack this out. And because he was tired of the complexity of a hay baler, the nodder and all that stuff. And we had an old one, and it didn't work very well. And so we got a hay loader and just made loose hay. And I did that through my teen years. And so he made this amazing dump wagon without any hydraulics, just with basically it was pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, and the mechanism actually worked, but the hay didn't. Instead of making a nice 20-foot bread loaf pile, we made a squatty 10-foot pyramid, and so we used it one time and it didn't work, but then we went on to something else.
So how much is it that, like, when I think about what the barrier would be for somebody to accept it, it seems to me that mentality, that eagerness to kind of experiment and sort of figure it out and always be improving, would be a barrier for a lot of people who just want to be told, hey, you throw the fertilizer on, you get the baler out, it's all very cut dried, and sort of there's a simplicity to the conventional farming that kind of is sort of good enough, whereas it seems like your mentality is much more of like, it's not good enough. We could figure out a better way.
Yeah, that's right. Always. And thinking, I always tell people our hardest work is thinking. I mean, thinking is the hardest work that we do. And so that was a critical element. I remember he was always observing, and in the early days, we just had 10 or 12 cows, and he made this was cool. He made a portable feeder gate where we could just feed through the hay pile. So instead of taking hay outside, the cows could just push this hay gate through the pile and just self feed off the face of it. It was really slick. Problem was every week we had to shovel out the manure because the cows would get all poopy in there. They're dropping manure and stuff. So every Saturday morning when he was home from work, my brother and I, we'd go out with him and we'd shovel in the manure and spread it. And what he started seeing was that what we spread in the winter before mid-February, you couldn't even tell you'd spread anything. But after February, middle of February, I mean, it just turned the ground green and it was a green strip. And well, what's the deal here? And realized, well, when the soil is dormant and that far from spring, it either vaporizes or leaches all the nutrients and you lose everything before spring. So then, well, how do we solve this problem? We've got to figure out a way to store the manure so we don't have to spread it in the winter and the cows don't get all poopy. So that's when we went and bought an old used wood chipper, and began chipping wood to go in as bedding, what we now call a carbonaceous diaper behind the cows that could absorb the manure and urine and keep the cows nice and clean through the winter as we advance this hay gate through. So a lot of it was simply observation. The most amazing thing that he ever built was in the late '60s. He's thinking, we're trying to think about fertility. It was all about how do we make our resources work for us. That was the thing. Stop the leaks. Stop the leaks. Make your resources work for you. And so we realized, well, we're losing all this manure in the summer. We're losing cows go under the shade trees for shade. Well, we don't want manure under the trees. We want it out here in the field. And so he bought an old burned out mobile home, and a friend and I, we wanted to build a cabin up in the woods. So he said it had one bedroom that hadn't burned, and he said if you'll strip the frame off and you guys can take that bedroom apart, take it up there and put it together for your cabin up in the woods. So we did that. I was 13, my friend was 15. We were kids, and this was a great project for us. Well, then we had a stripped off bedding, and he made a portable loafing shelter. Put some extensions on it. It was 50 feet by 20 feet. And we started moving that thing around like a big portable shade tree. And that was absolutely foundational to our early fertility management. That had a 5-year, you could see the rectangles, 5 years out from where it had been, where the cows had dropped their manure and urine out in the field. It was absolutely foundational. So, those were the kinds of things. He was just extremely creative that way in trying to solve the leaks. I mean, accountant, right? How do we solve the dollar leaks? And he saw it as how do we keep the resources from leaking?
Joe, I'm wondering about kind of like work and rest. We see in Scripture, 6 days you shall labor, one day you shall rest from your labor, and of course you have Scripture speaks to land resting as well. Do you have any kind of thoughts or practices on the farm when it comes to letting the land rest?
So this is an interesting question, and I've been privileged to know some pretty highfalutin Jewish scholars and things, and I have the official rabbinical, the current Israelite rabbinical concordance here behind me, and so I've consulted this stuff, and essentially, I may be wrong, but this is my understanding, that the fallow was for cropland. It was not for pasture land, because perennial grasses are land healing, because their energy flow, so they take sunlight, make biomass, and they are constantly putting carbohydrates into their root structure, into the soil, whereas annuals like wheat, barley, corn, those are extractive. They are pulling energy out of the soil and putting it in a big seed head, okay? And so the energy flow of perennials is into the ground. The energy flow of annuals is out of the ground. So the fallow, the land rest, was for harvested crops and tilled acreage. It was not for pasture that was grazed by livestock. And so since we don't crop and we we're in perennials and don't till anything, that that becomes I don't want to say inapplicable, but you see what I'm saying. It's not a critical factor for us because we are constantly putting back more than we're taking because of the energy flow and the controlled grazing of the animals, very much like the nomadic shepherds in Israel would have done during their day. And even the most conservative Israelite today, I've been over there. I've been with them in Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, but you don't call it the West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. They when it's a grazing animal on a perennial, it's in a different category than the cropland and the harvestable acreage.
That's a great answer. It seems that what you're basically, would you agree that we could sum up what you're doing as dominion farming, basically? Is that
Is that
Well,
fair?
I would like to, but I tend to not use the term because it's so whatever, it has such a bad connotation. So what I like to use is stewardship farming, or creation stewardship, or creation caretaking. And but to your point of the dominion, I dare to ask people, if look, this is the courthouse says we own this, but really God owns it. It's all God's stuff, right? The heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament His handiwork. I mean, it's everything is God's. So so if I owned this, I would be looking for a return on investment, and I don't think it cheapens God to say, that He's looking for a return on investment. I mean, He set a sun up there. I mean, the sun is supposed to be making, through chlorophyll and photosynthesis. The Earth is supposed to be on a weight gain program from day one. It was on a weight gain program, okay, and so. So the Earth is supposed to be getting heavier, heavier, heavier every day as all this sunlight is converted into biomass that can then feed earthworms and create soil and all this stuff. And so we humans, we have exploited this too often and have depleted it rather than leveraging it and moving that resource forward. And so so in return on investment, I I hope it's not sacrilegious to ask, well, if I were God, what would I want return on investment? And I would suggest that depleting aquifers and eroding soil and infertile frogs and three-legged salamanders and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island and the Gulf of Mexico, if that were mine, I'd say, you guys have been messing with my bag here. I don't like how you're messing in my bag. I mean, that would be my take on it. And when I talk like that to my my unbeliever friends, they totally get it. They absolutely get that concept, that idea of stewardship.
That's great. We're almost out of time here, but I wanted to get your sense. The documentary's been out for a little bit on it's on Angel Studios, now it's on Canon Plus. What's the response been? What have you heard as people have kind of seen what you're up to? What kind of response have you gotten from the documentary being out?
We are swamped. I mean, we are out of everything. We have never seen anything like this in our whole history. We are, I mean, it's the most wonderful problem to have, to be struggling to meet market demand, but it's also a pain because, people are upset. Well, you said you sold this stuff. Why don't you have it? You mean I can't get it for 3 months? This sort of thing. And so yeah, it has opened, doors and things for us that we never could have imagined, and it's especially been a blessing to have people that are completely unchurched, that are creation worshipers, to to appreciate that the Bible doesn't mean that you have to destroy everything. You got to realize, everybody, that if we're honest with ourselves, there's been a lot of abuse done in the name of God. I mean, think of the conquistadors, think of the crusaders, there has been a lot of abuse done in the name of God. And the unbelieving world out there, that's what they think of. That's what they see. And so I mean, I can't tell you how many times I do, media interviews, and I'll get asked, well, how can you care about this being a Christian? Christians are supposed to tear everything down. They're supposed to, want to exploit everything and just, and I said, well, some do, but that's not the way the Bible reads. And then you can have this conversation. And I encounter this routinely, and it's just so wonderful to now have such a beautiful portrayal, the cinematic work, the storytelling work, to have such a beautiful portrayal, to be able to have now this additional attractive point of contact with people, not only to defend the divine, okay, but also to start a conversation about, well, where are you on your journey? Where are you on this? And so I just can't tell you how thankful and what a blessing it's been on many levels for us as a
thank you so
farm,
much.
as a family,
Yeah.
as missionaries in a world.
Yeah, that's great, and it really is a fantastic documentary. I enjoyed every minute of it. Had lots of aha moments. The guys did a great job. James and your team did a great job putting it together. So if you've not seen it, Canon Plus, go watch The Lunatic Farmer. If you love that and you want to take it to another level and become a lunatic farmer, there's actually a course on Canon Plus that you can also take a look at and
That
learn.
Jared started.
That Jared started. Jared's on his way to becoming.
I got a quarter acre in town.
He's
I'm just getting going.
It's going to be a nice garden next year. But you can take a look at that.
My understanding is that Jared's got quite a work crew, and we got to hire these people. Jared's got them. He's got them sitting at the breakfast table.
That's
so,
right. Let's go.
You're ready to roll, man.
Let's go.
That's right, having the kids. So with that, Joel, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys on the next Doug and Friends.